travelers, and welcome to Go See, Do Explore.
Here, we dive deep into the heart of travel, sharing hidden gems, unforgettable experiences, and the stories that make each destination unique.
Whether you're a seasoned traveler or dreaming of your next getaway, you're in the right place to get inspired.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh.
And together, we'll set the course for your next great adventure and discover the stories that make each place unforgettable.
It's time to go, see, and do more. Let's explore. Hello, everybody. We are back for another episode of Go See, Do Explore. Back a few episodes ago, I think it was episode 22, we talked about our favorite travel television shows and where you can find them. Well, today we thought it might be interesting to kind of expand that outside of the traditional media, old school media environment and talk about our favorite YouTube channels, podcasts, and blogs in the travel sphere.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing some of my favorites too.
I should say that I am not a big YouTuber. Like, I don't watch a ton of YouTube. I much prefer more the old school scripted television. But we do watch a little bit, and especially the first one, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I kind of want to mention too that nowadays these channels tend to kind of blend. They'll have a YouTube channel that some of them have, also a podcast and then also a blog. So we'll talk about kind of how we view the content, but then I'll also mention if they have these other means as well. So the first one I wanted to talk about is one that we've been watching a lot of lately, and that is Paddle TV.
I love Paddle TV.
So Ken Whiting is the host of Paddle TV, and he is a world champion whitewater kayaker. Mm-hmm. And so he does gear reviews, kayaking gear reviews. He's done camping gear reviews. Probably our favorite episodes of Paddle TV, if you're not in the market for a new kayak or a new life jacket or paddle or whatever, he has video series of some of his trips that he does.
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing a lot of places in Quebec and Ontario. He lives in northern Ontario, not far from Algonquin Park and not far from the whitewater of the Ottawa River. And so a lot of his episodes take place in those areas. But in his first season of his long form episodes, he went to Quebec, to a place that we've never been. And that was really fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely added quite a few places to our kind of travel bucket list because of Paddle TV.
You first started watching this when you were looking for like a solo kayak this summer. And you're trying to get a sense of what was out there. And then I think we started watching it even more after we got so into the canoe and kayak events at the Olympics this summer.
Yes. Yeah, I think that helped. But yeah, it's kind of inspired us. We're talking about maybe learning whitewater kayaking next summer. We'll see.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken Whiting.
Yeah.
The second channel I want to mention is one that I have watched for a very long time, and that is Tips for Travelers, spelled with 2 L's, the UK way. He mostly does cruise reviews. He was doing, I think it was last summer maybe, he did a river cruise in Egypt that looked really cool. But yeah, he always has really interesting content typically in the cruise sphere.
Yeah. I know we used to listen to his podcast a long time ago. I didn't know that he was still doing stuff. I mean, I guess I should have assumed. Yeah.
And I think I follow him on Facebook too.
Got it. Yeah. So I'll talk about one of my favorites, and that is a channel called Downey Live. It's hosted by a guy named Michael Downey, who is from Vancouver, Canada, but is currently living in Hong Kong, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but still traveling all over. I first encountered his channel when I was looking at Amtrak trips, and he did a series where he went basically from Miami to Alaska, taking primarily trains. Of course, you can't do that completely on trains, and there are some other means of transportation in the middle there, but it was a really compelling series. I then saw that the previous year he had done via rail pretty much from the east of Canada to the west of Canada. And then I discovered that he really made a niche for himself in the train video space, but he does a lot of other kinds of travel experiences too. He got his start actually doing like a sort of behind the scenes videos. That was what his channel started out to be. He would go to like a ski resort and spend time with someone who does grooming on the slopes and things like that. But he does all kinds of different videos. He does a really nice job with the traveling and showing interesting things. So I like his channel a lot. And if you like train or transportation, he has a lot of that. I get the impression that he himself as an individual isn't necessarily like super into that in particular. He likes it, of course, but he knows that he has a following that's really into transportation. So, yeah.
I really enjoyed the California Zephyr series that we watched before we did that trip.
Yes, it was good.
Another one I want to talk about is called Playing with Sticks. This one's a little bit niche. They are a family that teardrop camp. So when we had our camper on order, that's kind of when I started watching and Playing with Sticks. He would do reviews of different teardrop small camper options. They had a pop-up at one point. He does reviews of all those things, but then he also will review other camping type accessories. So I just watched a video of this crazy cooler that is supposed to stay cold for, I think it was like 48 hours without any ice, only 2 ice packs. That was pretty crazy. It's where we got the idea to, maybe not the idea to get solar panels, but it was a little bit of an inspiration to get some solar panels for our camper, and then definitely the inspiration for solar panels plus an electric cooler.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you're into kind of minimalist camping, I wouldn't even necessarily say only small camper camping, but yeah, minimalist camping. Playing with Sticks is a great one to check out.
Yeah. Another one that I'll mention is kind of a weird one, I think, but I like to watch it, is a guy named Noel Phillips has a channel that's focused primarily on aviation, like commercial flying. So he basically just flies around the world every couple weeks, makes videos, releases the videos. That's really it.
I'm trying to decide if I should say this or not. It's kind of weird because he has traveled, like, he's probably been to every continent. I don't know if he was ever been to Antarctica.
Yeah, I don't know.
But he doesn't really seem to know anything about any place that he goes, and it's very strange.
Yeah, it really actually depends. Sometimes he does go and like actually interact in the culture, and sometimes no, it's literally just airport to airport. But I like it for a couple reasons. First of all, he's always going to really interesting places, and it's fun to see like what those airports are like or what those cities are like if he goes into them. Another thing I like is it's interesting to see, for me, I'm interested in the airline industry globally, and it's interesting to see how that can vary. And I also like when he has little misadventures or things. It's, that definitely happens traveling around the world like that all the time.
And on, like, not always the major airliners. You know, he's traveling pretty much every airline he can find.
Yeah. Sometimes I really like it when he'll just book the cheapest ticket from that airport somewhere else. And he's done this a few times. The most recent time, so he did live in England. And so a lot of times he would end up going through like Spain and then usually into like Turkey or Dubai or something like that. It's kind of where Ryanair would take him. Most recently, now that he's living in Texas, he ended up in Venezuela, which was really interesting. I mean, it was actually genuinely interesting to see what it was like for him, a Westerner in Venezuela, and sort of the pros and cons of being in that situation. But yeah, I mean, he's got a ton of videos, and if you're interested in, I think where this would be really helpful is if you're interested in seeing what a particular airline is like or what it's like to fly in a particular country or something like that, you can pretty much find it. It's all there in the midst of everything else that is also there.
He also has some Amtrak videos.
Yeah.
He did a cross-country trip on Greyhound.
Yeah, this is actually
very interesting.
This is actually how I found out about him, was just he came up in my recommendations. This trip he took on Greyhound from New York to Los Angeles, or Los Angeles, as he would say, which drives me crazy, but it was pretty interesting.
He took his whole family on a cruise. There was an episode or two about that.
Yeah.
And probably the coolest one, which is one of the trips that we've kind of added to our list, is the family took a yacht. Like, they chartered a yacht in the Bahamas for a week, and it was surprisingly not as expensive as you would think.
Yeah, surprisingly affordable for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very, very varied content, mostly based on flying, but then he's got some other stuff too. And yeah, interesting British opinions on things.
Yeah. And if you like seeing interesting planes and stuff like that, like I do, then you can see all kinds of cool planes on that channel. Another one I like to mention that I just recently started watching, it was another one that came up in my recommendations on YouTube, is a channel called Spain Revealed. Spain Revealed is a channel hosted by a guy named James Blick. He's a New Zealander who lives in Spain. He's married to a Spanish woman named Yali, who sometimes is on the show or sometimes is on the channel. They live in, I think, suburban Madrid. But they are, I think he got his start really in this channel anyway, helping people move to Spain. So he has a lot of content as someone who is from New Zealand but lives in Spain, how to move to Spain, what to expect. But he definitely has branched out into more sort of general travel and Spanish interest kind of stuff. And it's really fun to watch. I also learned fairly recently that he's one of the co-founders of Devour Tours. And when we were in Bologna, our food tour was a Devour Tours tour. So that was kind of a funny after the fact. I didn't know that was his business, but it is. His channel is really interesting. He talks a lot about Spanish wine too, which is interesting to us, or to me anyway. Yeah, I recommend that one.
So those are really the only ones that we watch regularly. I'm sure there are others, and I'm sure we are missing some good travel YouTube channels out there, but those are the ones that we can recommend to you. We're going to move to podcasts. Chris still listens to podcasts, but since my commute has become like 7 minutes, 10 minutes on a bad day, and he works from home, we don't listen to as many podcasts as we used to.
I listen to a lot less than I used to.
But it's always good to have some podcasts that you can download when you've got long driving days. So probably our go-to podcast is RV Miles. They are one that also have a YouTube channel and they have a blog. And you might be thinking like, oh, I'm not an RVer. This won't be interesting to me. And they do sometimes get into like how to unclog your black tank. And that's usually stuff that we skip.
Yeah.
Or what are some other really the best
very specific advice about tires,
the best sway bars, things like that that don't really apply to us. We do have a camper, but it's not a giant RV. So
it does have tires.
It does have tires. Definitely not regular giant RV tires. They're pretty small.
Just the standard trailer tire.
Yeah. But where I find them very interesting is pretty much almost every episode they're talking about a place that they visited, because for years they were full-time RVers. They recently bought a house, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of how the channel changes. But they were full-time RVers for years. Last summer, the summer of 2023, they did a Baja to Alaska trip that was really cool to listen to. And like I said, they, their travel focus is RV, quote unquote, camping, but they talk about the campgrounds that they visit, and they talk about, they always talk about at least one or two restaurants that they go to in the places. And it was really helpful when we did our Yellowstone trip, because they mentioned a lot of good restaurants in the Yellowstone area.
Yeah.
So, if you are interested in road trip travel in the U.S., I think RV Miles is one to definitely put on your list.
Yeah, one of the things that's really notable about their approach to RVing is that they enjoy cities. So their version of RVing is not only outdoors and nature. And it's definitely a big part of it, of course, and the national parks and all that. But they also visit cities, and they talk about the campgrounds they choose and how they handle that. And for years, they used RVing, I think, as a platform for travel, not merely a platform for like outdoor recreation. So it's been interesting to hear that perspective. We also like cities. We also like outdoors and nature too, but it's interesting to hear how they've managed some of those trips to big cities like Savannah and Seattle, and I'm trying to remember some others, California cities for sure.
And they also have the America's National Parks podcast. So if you're interested in the national parks and some of the history and, learning a little bit about the flora and the fauna of the parks, that's another good one to check out. It's a shorter one. I want to say the episodes are typically about 15 minutes. And they had for a while, which was probably my favorite in their podcast network, they had the See America podcast, but they haven't really been doing that one lately. So
they've seen it.
they've seen America. The next one I want to talk about is cruise radio. If you enjoy cruises, if you are planning a cruise radio is probably the number one podcast to listen to. He also has a blog. I think he's also on YouTube. Doug Parker. If you have taken a cruise recently, you can send him an email and get on the show, which I think I've done twice, at least once. But yeah, very knowledgeable about the cruise industry, talking about different cruise lines. If you have a cruise scheduled, you can listen to recent reviews to get an overview of the ship, an overview of ports that you might be visiting, and then he'll have experts on. He's a big advocate for travel insurance, especially for cruises. Yeah, that's Cruise Radio is a great one, and he definitely keeps an eye on cruise news too. It's
clear that he has a good formal broadcasting background,
yes,
unlike us amateurs. And he puts together a good podcast.
Yes. I don't know if he still is.
He used to be on terrestrial radio.
Yeah, he was on one of the Jacksonville radio stations. Yeah. And I mean, I think he is like mostly a Carnival cruiser because I think he's pretty loyal, and so he gets really good discounts being a Florida local. But he will sail other lines and obviously talks to other people that sail other lines. So
yeah.
No bias or anything, I don't feel like.
Well, I think some of those lines sometimes send him on those ships, right? To do reviews and things like that.
Yeah, he definitely gets like the media previews of the new ships and things like that. I think it's time for a wine break.
Let's go to the wine break. We're here for the wine break. We're going to do something just a little bit different today. We have here from Hickory Creek in West Michigan, Blaufränkisch from 2020. But we've talked about Hickory Creek before. I'm not going to talk about Hickory Creek right now. What I want to do is actually talk just a little bit about being open to wines that you haven't heard of. So that's what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's just try this Blaufränkisch and see how it is. It smells good.
It's from 2020, so it's on the older side.
It's been in our cellar for a bit. Yeah, pretty good. It's still got good acid. Still got good fruit. Yeah. It doesn't taste like a 4-year-old wine. We first heard of Blaufränkisch when we were in the Finger Lakes, and it's really common there. Sometimes it's referred to as Lemberger. That's the Austrian name. It's the same grape. It's the parent grape of Gamay and of another one called, I think this Weigelt is the name of it. But we had never heard of it before going to the Finger Lakes, and we learned that it is kind of a Central and Eastern European grape, but it grows well in cool climates like New York. So we thought, why don't they grow that in Michigan? And at the time, they didn't really. There was maybe 1 or 2 wineries that we were aware of growing it, but we have seen it more at other places lately, and Hickory Creek is one example. But I know that a lot of times wine labels, wine names can be confusing, or sometimes people will think that certain varieties are inherently superior, like if they name the grape, for example, that's inherently superior. Like I like a Cabernet Sauvignon and nothing else, and don't be blending my wine or whatever. And I wanted to take just a minute and talk about that as we drink this wine. So first of all, if you don't know this, very commonly in Europe and in some other parts of the world, wines are named after the regions in which they are grown. And they are particular grapes and they are particular formulas, but they are not labeled by the grape. So for example, Burgundy is Pinot Noir. Beaujolais, Gamay Noir. Bordeaux is a blend, up to 5 different grapes. The point is that very often these go by the names of the region. Whereas in North America, we tend to name and label our wines by the prominent grape in that wine. I say prominent grape because almost all wines are blended. Almost all wines are blended. Even if it says Cabernet Sauvignon on the bottle, there's a good chance that's up to 20% Merlot. And you want it to be blended. I know sometimes when I talk about this with people, they're shocked and appalled. But the thing is, every wine pretty typically has some sort of weakness. And a lot of times that weakness, like maybe low acidity or maybe high acidity or high tannin or low tannin or something like that, many times that weakness can be filled in by another wine. One of the reasons why so many people blend with Merlot is because Merlot is kind of low acid, but it's really full flavored, and it can be very complementary in red blends. So, don't worry about the blending. The blending is good. Now, the European wines, when they have a label, some of them are blends. Like I mentioned, Bordeaux is a blend, whereas others are typically a prominent grape with just a small amount of blending. But anyway, all of this to say, don't be afraid when you see a grape you've never heard of or a region you've never heard of. And maybe you don't know whether it's a region or a grape. It's always a good opportunity to Google or look in a wine book and find out a little bit more. So that's what we're sharing today as we drink this Blaufränkisch.
We enjoy going, I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of mega liquor store known as Total Wine in the US. They're popping up everywhere. That's a place where you can kind of browse the aisles and learn a little bit about wine, even if you're not not looking to pick up a ton of wine. But you can go, down the France aisle and there'll be Bordeaux and Rhone varieties. Then you turn the corner and there's Spanish wines. And then it's just a good way to kind of broaden your horizons in a really unintimidating way, I guess you could say.
That's it for the wine break. We're back from the wine break, and the next podcast that I would like to mention is one called Spanish Loops. I don't really know the reason why it's called Spanish Loops, but it's these two guys who are tour guides in Spain. They're full-time professional tour guides who organize these, week-long trips, small group, Jorge and Francisco. Jorge lives in Madrid, but is from Andalusia, and Francisco lives in Pamplona. And they basically just every week talk about a topic in Spanish tourism or Spanish history, Spanish culture. It's another one that I picked up through a recommendation and has been fun just to listen to. Some of these places we may visit someday, some of these places maybe not, but it's just interesting to listen to knowledgeable people talk about their country. So yeah, it's one that I listen to more for the entertainment factor than necessarily because I'm going to need information right now. But they're very entertaining, those two.
Well, they talked about one of the episodes that we listened to together. They talked kind of about the difference in visiting Spain for Americans.
Yeah.
And they said that in the U.S., we fill up our wine glasses all the way to the top. And that's kind of become like a joke now because that's not an American thing at all. At least not if you're in like a good restaurant that knows anything about wine. So it really made me wonder when they visited the U.S., where did they go? Were you at an Applebee's and asking for wine? I've got questions.
The ones I think about the most, apart from that, they had a really good episode about Gibraltar, and they interviewed someone who's a tour guide in Gibraltar and a Gibraltarian. They had a really good episode about bullfighting and like the controversy of bullfighting in Spain. They had one that I had no idea about all of Ernest Hemingway's connections to Spain. Living in Michigan, we hear a lot about Ernest Hemingway's connections to Michigan. But, it's no secret, actually. I was the one that just was ignorant, but it's no secret that he was super connected to Spain. And that was kind of an interesting and fascinating history. His conflict with the dictator Franco, but yet kind of a weird partnership in that Franco would have people like Hemingway visit to show like, oh, look, Spain's not that bad. These Americans are coming here. Like, it was really interesting. There's some other good ones too, but I'll leave it there.
The next one I want to talk about is, I'm going to say essential if you are planning a Disney World trip, and that is WDW Radio. I've mentioned Lou Mangello and WDW Radio on the podcast before. There are a lot of Disney podcasts out there, but this one is probably one of the best. He gets interviews with people that are pretty high up in the Disney company. He just had an interview not that long ago with Josh D'Amaro, who is the head of Parks and Resorts and is possibly in track to be Iger's next replacement. We'll see.
I don't know if Iger's ever going to retire.
But he is very passionate about Disney, and yeah, it's a really good one. He's been doing it for a very long time. I feel like he had his 20th or 25th anniversary not that long ago. I'm like, wow, I've been listening to this show for a long time. The only downside that I will say with WDW Radio is he can be overly positive at times. Like Disney will make, an unpopular decision and you'll see all the Disney people on social media going off and he'll kind of try to like spin it in a positive way. And so if you've been a Disney fan for a long time, sometimes that might rub you the wrong way. And there are other Disney podcasts out there, but I am out of the loop on that. Of course, you can always also try to see if you can find Generation Mouse. If you want some old school, out of date Disney information.
Yeah. He's probably balancing some of the other more negative voices out there.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are some real negative
There are
ones.
some really negative ones.
Like why do you even do this? If you
No.
love it so much.
No. Yeah, that is definitely true.
The last podcast we'll mention is one that we've probably tangentially mentioned before, but that is the Rick Steves podcast. It's also a radio program, right, on public radio, but they podcast it. And what's, I guess, notable about this is...
It's called Travel with Rick Steves.
Travel with Rick Steves is the name of this podcast. What's notable about this is while it does have a heavy Europe focus, it's not exclusive to Europe in the same way that his television and his books, things like that. Rick Steves' specialty is Europe. But on the podcast, I'd say it's probably 70% Europe or so, and then the other 30%. He talks to people about travel all over the world. It's a public radio show, so it's got kind of that aesthetic, meaning that, he gets the call-ins and the people that don't really have a question. But it's good to listen to. We've definitely learned things from it. Maybe the key takeaway the single key takeaway from listening to that was understanding how coffee shops typically work in Italy, that you go, pay at the cash register, get a receipt, and then you go to the barista and kind of shove it in their face. And that's how you get their coffee. Although I will say in practice, that was a mixed experience in Italy for us. It wasn't always that way. I was still glad that I knew it, because in the couple of coffee shops we went to that it was like that, I knew what I was doing, and that was cool.
Right. What I would say, if you're not someone that loves the public radio thing, I would go through the Rick Steves Travel Archive and find the episodes where he's talking about a place that you have plans to visit or a place that you would really like to visit, and then listen to those and maybe skip the ones that aren't as interesting to you. Doesn't mean that they're bad. We went through a phase where we listened to a lot of it, and it kind of started to grate on you after a while.
It's kind of, they make so many of them that a lot of times you get the same guests, you get the same themes. Like, good for them that they can make so many, but it's just not really bingeable.
Yeah, because I think there is one on public radio once a week, and sometimes they are reruns, and so they'll show up in your feed as like 438B or something like that, and that means that they've run it before.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're going to switch gears and talk about some of our favorite travel blogs.
Yes. We're excited to talk blogs. I'll mention the first one that we really like, and that is a blog website called Fresh Off the Grid. Fresh Off the Grid specializes in camping recipes. And they have sort of different varieties, whether it's more kind of typical camper camping or whether it's backpacking. We've got all kinds of different setup. The first experience I had with this website was in 2021, I think. That was the first time anyway, but Ashleigh had me make chilaquiles. It was the first time I had ever made them, and it's something I still like to make quite often, using El Pato, the hot sauce, which is their recommendation. And so that one's really good. But the other experience I had recently was I was looking for some advice on over the fire cooking, I think it was. And I was looking up different techniques, methods to cook over the fire. And I was reading some website, and I thought, wow, this is really good. This is really well put together. And then sure enough, it was Fresh Off the Grid. Like, I hadn't gone to their website. I had gotten there by search. They produce really high quality recipes and really informative articles. I really like their stuff.
And if you're a vegetarian too, they have a lot of vegetarian options. They have meat options as well, but it's very inclusive in that way.
Yeah.
So you mentioned chilaquiles, which is, I think, something that a lot of people wouldn't consider making while camping.
Mm-hmm. But their recipe is really easy to do.
Yeah. They have recipes from a lot of different cultural backgrounds. Like there's a shakshuka.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not all...
The chilaquiles of Morocco.
Yes. It's not all, put a hot dog on a stick and cook it over the fire.
Right.
This is my
right.
point.
Or wrap stuff in foil and
Yeah.
put it on the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more flavorful, more interesting. Yeah, actually, upon further reflection, I think the first time we ever used their website was I made pad thai camping in like 2018 or something like that. And I remember when Ashleigh said to me, "You're going to make pad thai while camping," I just looked at her like, "You've got to be kidding me." Like, that's a production at home. You're going to have me do that camping. But actually, the way they have you pre-prep ingredients and the way they simplify recipes for camping works really well.
So the next two blogs, I'm going to go in the extreme opposite direction of, cooking in the woods. And we're going to go to the Disney food blog. If you are planning a trip to a Disney park, check out the Disney food blog. They have so much information about food, dining in the Disney parks. They'll help you figure out where you want to eat. They'll help you figure out if you are getting the dining plan. They'll help you figure out how to make best use of your dining plan credits. If you happen to be at the parks during an Epcot festival, they'll have all the menus for all of the booths. It's really all encompassing in the world of food and Disney.
I thought their website was really helpful when we just went for Festival of the Arts a few months ago.
Yeah. And they also have ebooks that you can download. Obviously, like you buy and then you download like Disney Food 101, the Disney Dining Plan, and then you can buy individual books for each park to tell you, oh, she's got snack books. Yeah, it's an absolute treasure trove of Disney food knowledge. So definitely that's one. And then the other one is probably my favorite Disney blog, non-food. I mean, they talk food sometimes too, and that is the Disney Tourist blog. Tom Bricker has been a name in the Disney online community for a very long time. Used to be a big, photographer in the Disney parks. And I feel like kind of like us, he's kind of backed off from the photography side. I mean, I think he's still taking pictures in the parks, but that's not all of it anymore.
He's not just bringing the long lenses and taking photos of people from a distance like he used to do.
He used to do that. I don't remember that.
Yeah. Or the crazy colorful HDR.
Yes.
Were like in fashion for a minute.
Yes. But now anytime there's any sort of news, Disney news, he's there covering it. Just like the Disney food blog, he'll post things when restaurants have new menus and things like that. But it's just so much, it's more all-encompassing of all of the Disney parks. He'll post rumors when there's rumors. He'll talk the news. He covers everything. And so it might be too much for a Disney first-timer, but if you are a Disney fan, definitely check out the Disney Tourist blog.
One that I'll recommend, albeit with some reservations, which I'll explain, is The Points Guy. You probably have heard of The Points Guy. He has a rather successful website that focuses a lot on how to optimize points for travel, which equates these days to credit card points. But buried in that is lots of reviews about airlines, certain classes of airfare on those airlines. That can be really helpful if you're flying a new airline for the first time and you're trying to decide what to book. Like this summer, we flew French Bee and we flew North Atlantic. Points Guy had articles about both of those airlines and what to expect on their planes that helped us make decisions about what to book. And just, they have general travel news too, pretty decent writing and information. Just know that their whole business is geared towards getting you to sign up for credit cards. They're pretty much in the pocket of the credit card industry at this point. And I mean, I'm not saying that to say like, oh, how evil, but just understand that that's what's happening there with their website. And so if you have some concerns about that business model like I have, then just be aware. I still consume their content. I still read their website, but like I'm not clicking their links to sign up for credit cards and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. But yeah, they have pretty good information about flights.
Another very helpful blog that has some connections to the Disney online community.
It was all Disney for you.
It's all Disney for me, is the Royal Caribbean blog. So the Royal Caribbean blog obviously is Royal Caribbean cruise focused. But the creator of the blog, Matt Hochberg, for years was one of the co-hosts of the WDW Today podcast. And he has since moved over into the cruise and Royal Caribbean specific sphere. Probably he's one of those people that gets, first access to their new ships and things like that. So he's got all kinds of information if you are planning a cruise on a Royal Caribbean ship. He's got, layouts. He'll help you figure out what the best stateroom is. He's also got YouTube videos and maybe a podcast. He's definitely been on cruise radio. Coincidentally, when we were on our Alaska cruise, I found out after the fact that he was also on our Alaska cruise and he got COVID and was quarantined in his stateroom. And I was like, man, I wish I would have known they were on this cruise because I have talked to him before.
Yeah. There were a lot of sick people on that boat.
There were a lot of sick people on that boat, yeah. Another one, if you want information about cruises, maybe more general cruise information, is the Cruise Maven. So Sherry Laskin is another person that's on cruise radio frequently. She is someone that refuses to fly, is afraid to fly or something like that. So she has a lot of information about cruising as transportation. She has done some information about Amtrak, but she'll talk about different cruise lines. She'll write about different ports of call. It's a good wealth of information if you are planning a cruise.
Yeah, and if you're interested in traveling the world without flying, that's probably one of the best sites.
And the last one we wanted to talk about is a website that we discovered at the first travel show we went to, and that is Break the Travel Barrier. It's written by someone we met at that travel show who is Russell Hannon. He's another Canadian.
Yeah. Canada featuring prominently on this list. Good job, Canadians.
But his whole thing is traveling like as cheaply as possible.
Or as cheaply as possible, but getting good value.
Yes,
right? Like
yes.
Not like sleeping in the dirt so that you can travel as cheap. I just want to clarify. Like, you're not wrong, but I just want to clarify.
He's got posts on the blog about finding a hotel that gives free drinks, ways to save on holiday travel, how to camp for free. If you want to save as much money as possible and still travel well, it's definitely a website to check out. And he has a book as well.
Yeah. He has lots of really great tips.
Yes. Stop dreaming, start traveling. And then on his website, there is a lot of information about where you can see him live, where you can meet him. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I get the impression that he makes a lot of his income traveling to speak and to sell his book.
Yeah. So that's what we have for our favorite travel content.
Yeah, hopefully there's something here on this list that sounds interesting to you and you can go check it out.
Yeah. And let us know if we missed one of your favorites, because I know there's more out there. And I'm always looking for more travel content.
Definitely.
That helps with when you're stuck at home. So you're stuck at home and you are doing your travel dreaming to have different things.
I think that's the main reason why I watched Noel Phillips.
Yeah.
It's just like fly around the world. Yeah.
I'm stuck at home. Where is he today?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.
That's all for today's episode of Go, See, Do, Explore. Thank you for joining us and sharing in the wonder of travel.
Keep the spirit of today's adventure alive by checking out our blog at goseedoexplore.com for even more travel inspiration.
Don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps fellow travelers find us and join our community.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep traveling by any means necessary.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh, bidding you farewell and happy exploring.